With the coronavirus vaccine on the way, many Americans are wondering if they'll be required to take it. Currently, there is no law that makes it mandatory for Americans to receive the vaccine, as we understand it, but will that change? Could it change once the FDA issues full approval? Also, what authority will employers have? Will American workers be required to receive the vaccine before returning to work? Joining us now to answer all of that right now is Touro College professor of law, Thane Rosenbaum. Thane, you also, by the way, author of Saving Free Speech. And this is a freedom a lot of people are wondering about, especially those early on in the life of this vaccination, concerned about whether it's safe or not. Can an employer force you to take it?
Well, Bob, right now, employers have rights to establish safe work environments for their employees, provided they don't violate state or federal anti-discrimination laws or violate the collective bargain agreement with the unions, and as long as they provide religious and medical exemptions. You know, the Bill of Rights is silent on vaccinations. And so the freedom of contract and the freedom of property ownership, we give much more leeway to employers than we do to governments. Remember, this is why Colin Kaepernick, people wondered, well, why can't he take a knee? Doesn't he have a First Amendment right? And the answer is he does if the city of San Francisco makes him do it, but not if the San Francisco 49ers makes him do it. That's his employer, and he's on the job.
Will the requirements change when you consider the private sector, as you were just speaking on, versus government employees?
Well, that's a good question, Heather. Generally speaking, again, this goes back to an equal protection argument. Can the government require public employees throughout their workforce to receive mandatory vaccination as a condition of employment? Provided that it's not applying only to, say, Asians or Jews or African Americans. So providing there's no equal protection argument and it's being administered without any discrimination, and there are religious, and again, I think this is important, religious and medical exemptions is something that the EEOC is going to be interested in. But remember, Heather, the EEOC a number of years ago said that employers have the right to mandate flu vaccinations. So you could see employers saying, well, if I can mandate a flu, why can't I make my employees safe from COVID? And by the way, you guys are too young to remember this, but they used to be able to smoke at work, and you can't do that anymore. And that's another reason that the idea is that if smoking causes a potential harm to fellow employees.
Yeah, you used to be able to smoke on an airplane as well, and now you got to wear a mask.
I'm glad that's gone.
Heather, there's no way you remember that.
Used to hate that. So you can't, even a private employer can't violate your civil rights, which is why you might have religious exemption. And you also mentioned a medical exemption. How does somebody establish that? Because a lot of people now, they've seen what's happened over in the UK. They might say, I get seasonal allergies, and sometimes they're kind of bad.
Bob, this is an excellent point you're making. You saw this in the vote. I hate to come back to what I usually talk about on NewsMax, but we saw that also when people requested absentee ballots on the theory that they were vulnerable because of COVID. And there was no way to know whether were they really more vulnerable than anyone else on COVID. Yes, the concern is that most people don't regard the COVID vaccine because of its novelty as a flu shot. But again, the Supreme Court has granted a right to privacy. And that, of course, is the reason we have marriage equality and why there's reproductive freedom. It would be interesting if the Supreme Court said that the right to privacy also means that you have a civil right not to receive a vaccine against your will.
And it would also, I would think, depend on the actual industry or the business itself and whether or not you as an employee come into close contact with other employees or customers.
Right. And Heather, there's the other thing. The question might then become, well, what other alternatives did you offer your employees? Did you say to them that they have to wear a mask, or that they could actually work from home, right? So that might actually come up with collective bargaining and unions saying, you can't fire this guy simply because he's afraid to come into work. We just had a global pandemic. You can't fire him. You have to give him other options. And we might see EEOC guidelines that offer a series of things that employers may or may not do in the aftermath of this vaccine.
Yeah, uncharted territory yet again. All right. Thank you so much, Thane. We appreciate it.
Anytime, Bob.